Girl pregnant sits at the wrong table during a blind date without knowing he is a millionaire. Hannah Mitchell nervously adjusted her emerald green dress over her 6-month-old belly as she walked through the doors of Bella Luna, one of Boston's most sophisticated Italian restaurants. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the small clutch bag where she kept the lipstick that her best friend Rachel had insisted she wear tonight. "You deserve one last adventure before the baby comes," Rachel had said when organizing this blind date. Hannah wasn't so sure. At 32, pregnant and single, a blind date seemed more like a recipe for disaster than romance. The maitre d' greeted her with a polite smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, a table for 2. It should be under the name of Andrew Matthews," Hannah replied, looking for the white rose that her suitor should have been wearing on his lapel as agreed by Rachel. Her eyes roamed around the elegant room with its exposed brick walls and vintage lamps that created a cozy atmosphere. At a table near the window, she noticed a man standing alone, wearing an impeccably cut suit. There was no rose on his lapel, but something about him captured her attention. The maitre d' frowned, consulting his list. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see any reservations under that name." Hannah felt her stomach sink. Typical. She checked her phone, no messages from Rachel or the mysterious Andrew. Sighing, she was about to turn around when the man at the window table looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, she was paralyzed. His eyes were a deep, intense blue, and there was something in his expression that made her hesitate. He smiled, a discreet but genuine smile, and Hannah felt her cheeks flush. "Excuse me," the maitre d' interrupted. Her thoughts, "Would you like to wait at the bar?" Before she could answer, the man at the window stood up and walked towards her. "Hannah," he asked, his voice low and soft. Confused, but inexplicably relieved, Hannah nodded. Something deep inside her said that she should correct the misunderstanding, but the words wouldn't come out. "Please join me." He gestured towards his desk. "I'm James." The maitre d', looking satisfied that the situation had been resolved, discreetly walked away. Hannah followed James to the table where he pulled out a chair for her with a gentleness that surprised her. "Sorry I'm late," she murmured, still unsure of how to proceed. James smiled again, his eyes twinkling with something that looked like amusement. "Actually, you're perfectly on time." As he settled down, Hannah noticed the details: the leather briefcase on the table, the discreet but obviously expensive watch. On his wrist, the way the waiters treated him with special deference. This man wasn't Andrew Matthews, she was sure of that, but there was something magnetic about his presence. "So, you're a teacher?" James asked, surprising her. "Yes, Art. How?" "Your hands," he explained. "They have paint stains that haven't come off completely." Hannah blushed unconsciously, rubbing the small blue spots on her fingers. "I work with elementary school children. They're enthusiastic about colors." The conversation flowed naturally after that. James was an attentive listener, asking insightful questions about her work, her students, her passion for art. She found herself sharing stories about her favorite projects, about how art could transform children's lives. "What about the baby?" he asked gently after the waiter had served their entrees. Hannah hesitated, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "It's a girl," she replied, expecting to see the discomfort in his eyes. But James just smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "She'll be very creative, I imagine, with an artist mother." The evening progressed like a hazy dream. James talked about his own interests, technology, innovation, the future of education, but in a way that never sounded pretentious. There was a humility in his manner that contrasted with his obvious sophistication. It was only when the restaurant began to empty that Hannah realized how much time had passed. James asked for the bill, politely ignoring her attempts to share. "It's been a memorable evening," he said, helping her to her feet. "Can I see you again?" Hannah felt her heart race. This elegant, intelligent, and kind man wanted to see her again, her a pregnant teacher, who who shouldn't even have been there in the first place. James, why? I have to be honest. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was here for a blind date with someone else. To her surprise, James laughed softly. I know. I realized as soon as you walked in that you were looking for someone with a rose in their lapel. I was expecting an associate for a business meeting, but... He paused, his eyes meeting hers. Sometimes the best moments in life are the unplanned ones. Hannah felt something warm expand in her chest. You knew all along. And I don't regret one bit that I didn't make it clear earlier, he admitted. But now I'd like to do things the right way. Hannah. Mitchell, would you do me the honor of a second date? This time completely intentional. The smile that lit up Hannah's face was all the answer he needed. As they walked out of the restaurant into the Boston night, neither of them noticed the man with a white rose in his lapel who had arrived an hour late and left unnoticed. What Hannah also didn't know was that James Cooper, the CEO of one of the country's largest technology companies, had just had the most significant encounter of his life, all because of a happy twist of fate. The next morning, Hannah could barely concentrate in her art class. As she helped a fourth grader with her watercolor painting, her thoughts kept returning to the night before at Bella Luna and to James with his intense blue eyes and gentle smile. Miss Mitchell, you're glowing today, commented little Sophie, her most observant pupil as Hannah adjusted her paint-stained apron. Is it because of the baby? Hannah smiled, stroking her belly. Maybe, Sophie. Sometimes happiness just overflows. During the break, Hannah checked her phone for the 10th time that morning. James had sent her a message early on. Coffee tomorrow. I know a perfect place on Beacon Hill. Her heart raced again as she reread the words. Rachel, of course, had been furious when Hannah had called the night before to tell her about the blind date fiasco. I can't believe Andrew dumped you, she exclaimed. But wait, you're telling me you ended up on a date with a complete stranger, Hannah Mitchell. Where's that cautious girl I know? Still here, Hannah replied, laughing. But there was something different about him, Rachel. Something authentic. The sound of the school bell brought her back to reality. As her students left for lunch, Hannah decided to do a quick Google search on James. After all, it was 2024, and a little caution wouldn't hurt. She typed in James and stopped realizing that she didn't know his last name. In the afternoon, when she checked her phone again, there was another message from James. Forgot to mention there's a contemporary art exhibition at the MFA this weekend. Interested? Hannah smiled, remembering how he had shown genuine interest in her work with art education. The conversation flowed naturally via message, and before she knew it, she was sharing photos of her students' projects. Impressive, he replied. You really have a gift for inspiring creativity. At the end of the school day, Hannah found Rachel waiting in the school parking lot. Okay, I need to meet this Prince Charming who stole my best friend from a blind date, Rachel declared, entwining her arm in Hannah's as they walked to a nearby cafeteria. He's not a prince, Hannah protested, but her flushed cheeks betrayed her. Let me see a picture of him then, Rachel insisted as they sat down with their iced teas. Actually, we didn't take any. Rachel arched an eyebrow. Hannah, you need to be smarter. What if he's married or a criminal? Or worse, one of those guys who still lives with his mother at 40? He's 38, Hannah corrected automatically. And he's none of those things. He's different. At that moment, Rachel's cell phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and her eyes went wide. Oh my God. What? Rachel turned the phone to show a technology news item. In the photo, James was on stage presenting his company's latest product. The headline read, James Cooper, CEO of Innovatech, announces revolutionary augmented reality system for education. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. That can't be. Wait. Rachel brought the phone closer to Hannah's face. Is this your James? Hannah nodded slowly, recalling the details of the night before with new perspective. The deference of the restaurant staff, the expensive leather briefcase, the way he talked about technology and education. Did you have a date with James Cooper? Rachel almost shouted, lowering her voice as other people looked in her direction. James Cooper. the tech billionaire who revolutionized the virtual reality market, the man Forbes called the new face of innovation. Hannah felt her stomach turn, and it wasn't because of the baby. He didn't mention anything like that. Of course not, Rachel replied, now frantically scrolling through more articles. He's known for being extremely private. He hardly ever gives personal interviews. The press can barely get photos of him outside of corporate events. Hannah picked up her own phone, rereading the messages exchanged with James. Each word now seemed to carry a different weight. Why hadn't he told her? What else was he hiding? What do I do now? She asked, more to herself than to Rachel. Well, first you go to that cafe tomorrow, Rachel answered pragmatically. Then you decide if you can trust someone who started a relationship by hiding such a significant part of who they are. Hannah spent the night restless, her mind alternating between the wonderful connection she felt with James and the feeling of having been deceived. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamt of binary code mazes and white roses that never arrived. The next morning, standing in front of the mirror adjusting a navy blue dress that highlighted her pregnancy rather than trying to hide it, Hannah made her decision. She would go to the cafe. She would give James the chance to explain. After all, she hadn't been completely honest earlier in the evening either. Her phone vibrated with a new message. Looking forward to seeing you. I promise there will be no misunderstandings today, only truths. Hannah took a deep breath, stroking her belly where her daughter moved gently. Okay, little one, she whispered. Let's give the truth a chance. Hannah arrived at Tata Bakery and Cafe on Beacon Hill 15 minutes early, her hands nervously clenching the strap of her handbag. The aroma of freshly baked bread and fresh coffee filled the cozy atmosphere with its exposed brick walls and large windows that let in the Boston morning light. She chose a table in the corner next to a bookcase, full of old books where she could watch the door. Her heart leapt when James entered at 9 o'clock. He spotted her immediately, and her genuine smile made his doubts momentarily waver. Good morning, he said softly, taking a seat opposite her. He was wearing a casual navy blue sweater over a white shirt, a significant change from the impeccable suit of the night before, but still elegant. You look beautiful. Hannah felt her cheeks flush but held her ground. James Cooper from Innovatech, she said, watching his reaction carefully. He didn't seem surprised, just let out a resigned sigh. So you found out. Rachel showed me an article yesterday. Hannah explained, her voice trembling slightly. Why didn't you tell me? James signaled to a waitress before answering. After placing their orders, a chai latte for Hannah and a black coffee for him, he turned his attention fully to her. Because for the first time in a long time, someone saw me only as James. He began, his blue eyes meeting hers with intensity. Not as the CEO, not as the tech billionaire, just as a man who was lucky enough to meet a fascinating woman in an Italian restaurant. But it was a lie by omission, Hannah insisted, although her resolve was beginning to waver at the sincerity in his voice. It was, he admitted, and I regret not telling you sooner. But everything we talked about, everything I shared about my thoughts, my interests, was genuine. When you talked about your work with children, about how art can transform lives, I saw a passion that I mirror in my own work with educational technology. The waitress returned with their drinks and a selection of still warm croissants. Hannah picked up her cup, allowing the comforting warmth to spread through her hands. My life is complicated, James continued. Most people I know have an agenda. They want something: investments, connections, publicity. Last night, for the first time in years, I was able to just be myself. And who are you really? Hannah asked, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. James smiled, a different smile than usual, more vulnerable, more open. A man who grew up in a small apartment in Chicago, the son of a high school teacher and a mechanic, who found in technology a way to solve problems and make a difference, who built a company not just to make money but to transform education. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. A man who at 38 realized that all professional success means nothing without someone special to share it with. Hannah felt her daughter stir as if responding to James's words. Instinctively, she put her hand to her belly. "Is she moving?" James asked, his eyes shining with genuine interest. "Yes," Hannah replied, surprised by his perception. "She's been more active lately." "May I?" he asked hesitantly, holding out his hand. With a nod, Hannah guided his hand to the spot where her daughter was kicking. The moment was surreally intimate, and she watched the expression of wonder that crossed James's face. "Hannah," he said, his voice low and intense, "I know we started in an unconventional way. I know I've omitted an important part of who I am, but I'd like to do it right now. No secrets, no omissions." "How can it be so simple?" she asked. "Your life is so different from mine. You run a billion-dollar company I teach art to, elementary school children." "And that's exactly why you fascinate me," he replied promptly. "You see value in the things that really matter: creativity, education, transformation. The very things that drive my work." Hannah bit her lip, considering. "The press, your public life, they can be managed," he assured her. "I'm private by choice, not necessity. And I promise that if you give me the chance, I'll do everything to protect your privacy and that of your daughter." "Our life would be very complicated," she warned. "Or it could be extraordinarily simple," James countered. "We could start with one coffee at a time, one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations other than really getting to know each other." Hannah looked out of the window, watching the pedestrians passing by on the charming cobbled street. The fall morning was clear, the sun making the golden leaves of the trees glow. How had her life changed so much in just 24 hours? "Okay," she finally said, turning to James. "One coffee at a time, but on one condition." "Anything," he replied promptly. "Total honesty from now on, about everything." James reached across the table, interlacing his fingers with hers. "I promise. And to start, how about I tell you about Innovatech's new project to bring interactive digital art to public schools?" The smile that lit up Hannah's face was all the answer he needed. As the morning progressed between croissants and deeper conversations, they both realized that they were starting something truly special. Something that, despite having started with a misunderstanding, now had the potential to turn into an extraordinary story. The news about the alleged relationship between James Cooper and a mysterious pregnant teacher exploded onto Boston's digital media on a rainy Tuesday. Hannah was in the middle of her class when her phone started vibrating incessantly with messages from Rachel. "TMZ just published pictures of you with James on Tate. You need to see this now." Hannah's initial panic was interrupted by tiny fingers tugging at her apron. "Miss Mitchell, can I wear more blue?" asked Tommy, oblivious to the maelstrom forming around his teacher. "Of course, dear," she replied automatically, trying to keep her composure as her private world began to fall apart. During the break locked in the teacher's bathroom, Hannah looked at the photos. They were surprisingly intimate. James with his hand on her stomach, the two of them laughing over croissants, their fingers intertwined on the table. The headline was sensationalist: Tech's most coveted bachelor, found in secret romance with pregnant teacher. Her phone rang. It was James. "Hannah, I'm sorry about that. I'm on my way to school." "No," she almost shouted. "Reporters would be here in minutes. My students." "You're right," he interrupted gently. "My driver will pick you up at the back of the school in 20 minutes. We can talk in a safe place." Principal Margaret Brown appeared in his classroom a few minutes later. "Hannah, dear, perhaps you should take the rest of the day off. We've already had 3 calls from the tabloids." The car waiting for her was discreet, a black Audi with dark windows. The driver, a middle-aged man called Frank, had a gentle smile that calmed her nerves. "Mr. Cooper is waiting at the house in Brookline." The house was actually a historic colonial-style mansion surrounded by a meticulously tended garden. James was waiting for her in the driveway, his face a mask of concern and determination. "I'm sorry," he said as soon as she got out of the car. I should have seen it coming. Inside the house in the double-height library with oak bookshelves up to the ceiling, Hannah finally collapsed on the leather sofa. How did this happen so fast? Boston is smaller than it looks, James explained, taking a seat next to her. Someone at the cafe recognized us, sold the photos. My PR team is working to control the situation. Control it? Hannah laughed humorlessly. How exactly do you control it? My students, their parents, the whole school. We could issue a statement, James suggested gently. Something simple confirming that we're getting to know each other and asking for privacy. Or we could stop now, Hannah whispered, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, before it gets any more complicated. James knelt in front of her, his blue eyes intense. Is that what you want? Because if it is, I'll respect it. But I need you to know I don't care what the media says. I care about you, about your daughter, about what we're building. And what exactly are we building, James? A fairy tale that will crumble when reality hits you. Run a billion-dollar company. I earn a teacher's salary. You attend charity galas. I spend my days covered in gouache paint. And that's exactly why we work, he insisted. You keep me connected to what's real, to what matters. When you talk about your students, about art, about transforming lives, it reminds me why I started in tech in the first place. Hannah observed the library around her, the old books, the works of art on the walls, the view of the garden through the French windows. This was James's world, so different from her small apartment full of unfinished canvases and paintbrushes. I'm scared, she finally admitted. Not for me, but for her. Her daughter chose that moment to give her a particularly hard kick. James covered her hand with his. I'm afraid too. Of not being good enough, of disappointing you both, of my world complicating your lives. But I also know that some fears are worth facing. At that moment, Frank knocked discreetly on the door. Mr. Cooper, Ms. Chen from PR is on the line. Tell her I'll be back in an hour, James replied without taking his eyes off Hannah. Now I'll order us something to eat and we can plan how to face this together. Unless you really want to stop here? Hannah thought about her life before James' safe, predictable, lonely. She thought about the last few weeks, the late-night texts, the shared laughs, the way he made her feel seen and valued. I don't want to stop, she decided. But we need to set boundaries. My students, my school that needs to be protected. James's smile lit up his face. I already have some ideas about that. Innovatech has a digital art program that we could expand to your school. Turn that unwanted attention into something positive. No cameras in the school, Hannah warned, but a smile was beginning to form on her lips. No cameras, he promised, and I promise never to let you face it alone again. When lunch arrived, a selection of dishes prepared by James's private chef, they began to draw up plans. How they would navigate the media attention, how they would protect her privacy, how they would build something real amidst the chaos. And as the afternoon wore on in the quiet library, with the rain gently drumming on the windows, Hannah realized that maybe modern fairy tales weren't about princes charming, saving maidens. Maybe they were about two imperfect people choosing to face the world together one day at a time. The first week after the photos were leaked was a test of endurance for Hannah and James. The school had become a fortress of sorts, with discreet security guards hired by James strategically positioned to keep reporters away. Principal Brown proved to be an invaluable ally, protecting Hannah and her students from the media frenzy. Miss Mitchell, Sophie asked during art class, is it true that you're going to marry the computer man? Hannah nearly dropped the paintbrush she was holding. The children, of course, would eventually find out. Their parents certainly commented at home about the headlines that were still circulating. Sophie, dear, sometimes adults need time to get to know each other better before making important decisions, she replied diplomatically, noticing how the whole class had stopped to listen. My mom said he's like Tony Stark, exclaimed Tommy, causing several classmates to laugh. Less Avengers, more painting, please. Hannah redirected the class's attention silently, thanking them when their childish curiosity turned to more pressing art projects. In the evenings in her apartment, Hannah found refuge in video calls with James, who was in Seattle for a technology conference. "How was your day?" he asked, his face on the laptop screen showing genuine concern. The kids started asking questions. She sighed, settling back on the sofa. "Apparently you're the new Iron Man." James laughed, a sound that always warmed her heart. "Well, I have to admit that's a better comparison than some I've read in the tabloids this week." "Don't remind me," Hannah groaned, recalling the sensationalist headlines Rachel insisted on sending her. Pregnant billionaire slayer had been particularly creative. Innovatech's official statement has helped calm the speculation a little, James commented. "And the educational actions we're planning with your school will change the focus of the narrative." Hannah smiled, thinking of the project they had developed together over the last few days, a pilot program integrating traditional art and digital technology that would be implemented first at her school and then expanded to other public institutions. "The other teachers are enthusiastic about the project," she shared, "especially after I explained how we can use augmented reality to make art more interactive." "You're brilliant, you know that," James said, his intense blue eyes even through the screen. "The way you've adapted the program for different levels of education. My team is impressed." "Speaking of your team," Hannah hesitated. "Rachel insists that I need to meet them officially. She says I can't keep avoiding her world forever." "She's right," James admitted. "Actually, I was thinking about something. We have a charity event next month focused on education and technology. It would be the perfect time to formally introduce you not as my girlfriend that the media speculates, but as the arts education specialist behind the new program." Hannah felt a chill in her stomach. "A charity event with important people cameras and you shining like the incredible professional you are," James added. "What's more, Sarah Chen, my PR director, thinks it would be a smart move. It would establish you as a respectable professional partner, not just as, well, you know, the pregnant teacher who seduced the billionaire," Hannah joked, although there was a hint of insecurity in her voice. "The visionary educator who is helping to revolutionize art teaching in public schools," James corrected firmly. "Hannah, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but don't let the fear of judgment stop you from shining." At that moment, his daughter kicked particularly hard as if to agree. Hannah laughed, adjusting her position. "She's fussy today," she commented, stroking her belly. "Have you chosen a name yet?" James asked softly. It was territory they hadn't yet fully explored: the future, the baby, what they would be to each other when she was born. "Not yet," Hannah admitted. "I wanted something meaningful, you know, something that told a story." "Like a work of art," James suggested, making her smile. The silence that followed was comfortable, full of unspoken possibilities. It was Hannah who finally broke it. "Okay, I'll go to the event, but with a few conditions." "Name them." "First, I want to meet your team first, especially Sarah. I need to feel prepared." "Done. She already wanted to set up a lunch with you anyway." "Second, I want to have an active voice in the development of the educational program." "I don't just want to be a pretty face for the cameras." "Hannah," James interrupted, "you're already the driving force behind the project. My team is just implementing your vision." "And thirdly," she hesitated, gathering her courage, "I want us to be clear about what we are to each other. Not just to the media, but to ourselves." James became serious. "What are we to you?" "Two people discovering together how to navigate different worlds," she answered honestly. "Two people who against all odds have found something special and are willing to fight for it. Even against invasive photographers and sensationalist headlines," he joked, but his eyes were moved. "Even against that," she confirmed. "Besides, my daughter has already decided that she likes you. She always gets more excited when she hears your voice." "Wise baby," James smiled. "I'll be back tomorrow night. Dinner at my apartment. We can start planning your big debut in the corporate world." "As long as there's strawberry ice cream," Hannah bargained, making him laugh. Leaders of it, he promised. And Hannah, thank you for being brave, for giving us a chance. After they hung up, Hannah remained on the sofa watching the lights of Boston through the window. Her life had changed dramatically in just a few weeks, but for the first time the changes didn't scare her so much. She had James by her side, her daughter growing strong inside her, and a project that could make a real difference to the lives of her students. Perhaps she thought as she made her way to bed, adapting to new worlds wasn't so scary when you had the right people to help you navigate them. Lunch with Sarah Chen, Innovatech's PR director, was scheduled for a discreet restaurant in Back Bay. Hannah arrived 10 minutes early, her hands slightly trembling as she adjusted her navy blazer over her floral dress, an attempt to look more corporate without losing her essence. Sarah was already there, an elegant woman in her 40s with perfectly groomed black hair and a shrewd smile that seemed to assess everything around her. She stood up to greet Hannah with studied elegance. "Hannah Mitchell," Sarah said, holding out her hand. "We've finally met. James can't stop talking about you." As they settled down, Hannah noticed how Sarah discreetly scanned her appearance, probably already planning how to introduce her to the corporate world of Innovatech. "So," Sarah began, after taking their orders, "let's discuss how to transform you from the mysterious teacher into the educational visionary behind Innovatech's new initiative." "Straight to the point," Hannah commented, trying to mask her nervousness with humor. "Always," Sarah smiled. "That's why James pays me so well. Look, I'll be honest, we have a unique opportunity here. The media loves an unlikely love story, but we can offer something more substantial." "The education program," Hannah nodded. "Exactly. But first I need to understand, are you really ready for this? Because once we get on that path, there's no turning back. Your life will change permanently." Hannah took a deep breath, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "My life already changed permanently the moment I sat at the wrong table in that restaurant." Sarah leaned forward, her piercing eyes fixed on Hannah. "Do you know why James has never had a serious relationship exposed in the media before?" Hannah shook her head, curious. "Because he's never met someone who makes him want to risk exposing his personal side," Sarah revealed. "Until you. In 5 years of working with him, I've never seen him so determined to protect someone, and at the same time, so proud to show that person's work to the world." The waiter arrived with their starters, a niçoise salad for Sarah and a pumpkin soup for Hannah. For a few moments they ate in contemplative silence. "How do you cope?" Hannah finally asked. "All this public scrutiny." "With strategy and authenticity," Sarah answered promptly. "The public are forgiving of imperfections, but they can spot fakery from miles away. That's why I want you to remain exactly who you are, the art-loving teacher who accidentally won over one of the most powerful men in tech." "What about my daughter?" Hannah asked, her biggest concern coming to the fore. "Your pregnancy will be treated as a fact, not a story. No speculation, no drama, just a natural part of who you are." Sarah paused, taking a sip of water. "And I've already arranged the best private security team in Boston for when she's born." Hannah swallowed the reality of her new life hitting her full force. "It's scary, isn't it?" Sarah observed gently. "But you're not alone in this. There's me, there's the whole Innovatech team, and most importantly, there's James. He's amazing." Hannah admitted, an involuntary smile appearing on her lips. "And completely passionate," Sarah added with a knowing smile. "Now let's get down to business. The charity event is 3 weeks away. We need to prepare you, not just for the cameras, but for the questions, the stares, the whispers." The next 2 hours were dedicated to a crash course in public relations. Sarah was a patient but demanding teacher, covering everything from posture to appropriate responses to difficult questions. "Remember," Sarah emphasized as they ordered dessert, "you are not an accessory in James's life. You're a talented professional, bringing a unique and valuable perspective to our educational project." "What if I screw it up?" Hannah asked, her insecurity surfacing. "You won't," Sarah assured her. But if something goes wrong, I'll be there. Consider me your guardian in the corporate world. When lunch was over, Hannah felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. Sarah surprised her with a warm hug goodbye. "You're exactly what James needed," she whispered. "Someone real in a world of appearances." Back at school for her afternoon classes, Hannah found a message from James. "How did it go with Sarah?" "Surprisingly well," she replied. "Her PR is scary, but in a good way." "She said the same about you," James replied, followed by a smiling emoji. "Dinner tonight, I've got some news about the project." Hannah smiled into the phone, realizing that despite all the challenges ahead, she was genuinely excited about the possibilities that were opening up. Her life had turned into something she'd never imagined, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. As long as there's strawberry ice cream," she replied, recalling her previous condition. "It's already in the freezer," came the immediate reply, along with a cucumber pickle which Rachel mentioned was her new pregnancy wish. Hannah laughed, putting the phone away as her students began to enter the room. As she helped Tommy with his colors and Sophie with her collage project, she thought about how her life had become a blank canvas, ready to be filled with new colors and possibilities. And for the first time since discovering James's true identity, she felt truly prepared to paint this new story, one brushstroke at a time. The dress slid smoothly down Hannah's body as she observed herself in the full-length mirror of the Neiman Marcus fitting room. Sarah had insisted on taking her for a shopping spree in preparation for the Innovatech charity event, which was to take place in just 2 weeks' time. "This is perfect," Sarah declared, circling Hannah with critical eyes. The flowing navy blue silk dress fell elegantly over her 7-month belly with delicate lace detailing on the shoulders. Sophisticated but not ostentatious, maternal but not childish. Hannah turned slightly, watching as the fabric moved. "It's not too expensive. It's an investment," Sarah corrected softly. "Besides, James insisted on—" "No," Hannah interrupted firmly. "I don't want him to pay for my clothes. We've already talked about that." Sarah smiled, a gleam of approval in her eyes. "And that's exactly why you're perfect for him. But Hannah, accepting help doesn't diminish your independence." Before Hannah could reply, her phone vibrated with a message from Rachel. "Help. Reporters at school, someone leaked about the digital art project." Hannah felt her blood run cold. Sarah, noticing her expression, immediately went into professional mode. "What happened?" "The school." Hannah displayed the message, her hands shaking. "How did they find out?" Sarah was already dialing numbers on her cell phone. "Don't worry, I'll sort it out. Put your clothes on, I'll take you there." In the car, Hannah tried to stay calm while Sarah coordinated a quick response over the phone. "I want a security team at the school in 15 minutes. Yes, call the legal department. No statement until I arrive." "James," Hannah began. "He's already being informed," Sarah assured her. "He's at a board meeting, but he'll cancel everything if you need him to." "No," Hannah sighed. "He can't cancel every appointment when something happens. We need to learn to deal with it." Sarah gently squeezed her hand. "You're doing better than you think." When they arrived at the school, the situation was even worse than Hannah had imagined. Half a dozen reporters surrounded the main gate, cameras in hand. A few parents were also gathered around, whispering amongst themselves. Sarah guided the car to the back entrance where Principal Brown was waiting for them. "Hannah, darling, I'm so sorry about this." "How are the students?" was Hannah's first concern. "Safe and busy," the principal assured her. "We've implemented the privacy protocol that Mr. Cooper's team suggested." Sarah took charge of the situation with impressive efficiency. Within minutes, discreet security guards were strategically positioned and a makeshift meeting room was set up in the principal's office. "Let's make this work in our favor," Sarah declared, fingers flying over her tablet. "Hannah, get ready to make an official statement. We're going to announce the education project now on our terms. But the charity event, Sometimes we have to adapt the plan, Sarah smiled. Besides, what better place to announce an educational project than in a school? The next few hours were a whirlwind. Hannah exchanged quick messages with James, who offered his full support for the new strategy. Rachel showed up with a decaf coffee and a comforting hug. Innovatech's PR team transformed the school auditorium into a professional presentation space in record time. At 3 in the afternoon, Hannah stood in front of a select group of journalists, parents, and school board members. Her usual work dress, replaced by a more formal ensemble that Sarah had provided, but keeping her artistic pendant necklace her trademark as a teacher. Innovatech's Art Digital Integration Program, she began, her voice firm despite her nervousness, was born out of a shared vision to make art accessible and interactive for all children regardless of their socio-economic background. As she presented the project, Hannah felt her confidence grow. This was her tertiary education art transformation. Questions about her relationship with James were deftly redirected by Sarah to the focus of the program. When the presentation ended, Hannah was exhausted but proud. Sarah was overjoyed. "You were brilliant. The headlines tomorrow will be about educational innovation, not gossip." "I completely agree," a familiar voice sounded from the auditorium door. James was there, still in his meeting suit, a proud smile on his face. "Aren't you supposed to be on the board?" Hannah asked as he approached. "The board can wait," he replied, kissing her forehead softly. "That was more important." Later in Hannah's apartment, she finally allowed herself to relax on the sofa while James prepared tea in the kitchen. "How do you cope every day?" she asked. "The pressure, the stares, the expectations." James sat down next to her, handing her a steaming cup. "Honestly, I never cared much until I met you. Now, for the first time, I have something precious that I want to protect from public exposure." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "I guess we're learning together then." "And you're doing admirably," he assured her. "Sarah said you were born for it." "Sarah exaggerates?" Hannah laughed. "But today I felt like I could really make a difference. Not just as James Cooper's girlfriend, but as myself." "That's exactly how it should be," James replied, his hand finding hers. "Two worlds meeting, not one absorbing the other." The baby kicked as if to agree, making them both smile. "She seems to approve too," Hannah commented. "Speaking of which," James hesitated. "I've been thinking about names." Hannah raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Really? How about Aurora?" he suggested. "Like the dawn of something new." Hannah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Damn hormones. "It's perfect," she whispered. As night fell over Boston, Hannah reflected on how her life had changed in just a few weeks. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by something stronger: hope. Hope that maybe she could create something truly special, not just with the educational program or with James, but with her little Aurora, who was already helping to build bridges between different worlds. 2 nights before the Innovatech charity event, Hannah found herself alone in her apartment, surrounded by dozens of drawings by her students. Each colorful work represented their visions of the future of digital art, some surprisingly insightful for elementary school children. The phone rang, displaying her mother's name. Hannah hesitated before answering. Ever since the news of her relationship with James had come to light, her family in Minnesota had been cautiously reserved on the subject. "Hannah Marie Mitchell," her mother's voice sounded firm on the other end of the line. "Do you intend to tell me personally about this billionaire, or will I have to keep reading about my daughter in the gossip magazines?" "Mom," Hannah sighed, adjusting herself on the sofa. "It's complicated. Life usually is, darling. But your sister has just shown me photos of you presenting a $1 million educational project, and your father is worried that you're being used by some Playboy executive." Hannah couldn't help but laugh. If her family knew James, the real James, who spent hours discussing art with her, who memorized her ice cream preferences, and who sang softly to Aurora every night, they would understand how wrong they were. "He's nothing like that, Mom. Hannah defended. James is different. He sees me for who I am. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Well, then maybe it's time we got to know him too. Your father and I can fly to Boston this weekend. Hannah's initial panic was interrupted by a soft knock on her door. It was James, carrying a bag from the market and wearing jeans and a casual sweater so different from the CEO the world knew. Mom, can I call you back? I have a visitor, Hannah said, gesturing for James to come in. It's him, isn't it? Her mother asked slyly. Tell this young man that we hope to meet him soon. And Hannah, be happy, dear. After hanging up, Hannah watched James organizing ingredients in the kitchen. My parents want to meet you, she announced, trying to sound casual. James stopped arranging tomatoes, turning to her with a smile. It was only a matter of time. Do you want me to book tickets for them? No, Hannah protested. They can pay for their own tickets. We've talked about this, James. I don't want my family to think I'm with you for the money. James crossed the small kitchen, taking her hands in his. Hannah, I know you're independent. It's one of the things I admire most about you. But let me do this, not as a financial gesture, but as a gesture of respect to your parents. You're nervous about meeting them, she realized, noticing the subtle tension in his shoulders. Terrified, he admitted with a self-ironic smile. I'm good at board meetings and multi-million-dollar negotiations, but meeting the parents of the woman I love, that's completely new territory. Hannah froze, her heart racing. Do you love me? James tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, his blue eyes intense. I thought it was obvious. I'm in love with you, Hannah Mitchell. For your strength, your integrity, your passion for art and education, for how you see the world, and how you make me want to be a better person. Tears began to form in Hannah's eyes. Hormones, she murmured, making him laugh softly. It's not just hormones, he said, pulling her closer. It's real. All of this, you, Aurora, our future together is more real than anything I've ever had. Hannah buried her face in his chest, inhaling his familiar scent. I love you too, she whispered. Even when you try to buy expensive tickets for my parents. James laughed, kissing the top of her head. Speaking of shopping, I've brought you something to try. He retrieved an elegant box that Hannah hadn't noticed before. Inside was a delicate white gold necklace with a brush-shaped pendant. To wear at the event, he explained. Sarah approved of the design. She said it suited her personality while still being appropriate for the occasion. Hannah touched the pendant reverently. It's perfect, she admitted. But James, I can't. It's not an expensive gift, he interrupted softly. It's a promise that no matter how many charity events or council meetings take place, you will always be an artist first, a teacher, the woman I fell in love with in that Italian restaurant. Hannah allowed him to place the necklace around her neck, the cold metal against her warm skin. In the reflection of the kitchen window, she could see how the pendant glowed softly under the lights. Now, James said, turning his attention to the ingredients on the worktop. How about we make dinner together? I promise not to burn anything this time. As they prepared the meal, chatting about the impending event and her parents' visit, Hannah realized that she had found her balance. Between James's glamorous world and her simple life as a teacher, there was a space that was uniquely theirs, filled with love, understanding, and silent promises made over homemade tomato sauce. Aurora stirred as if sensing the peace of the moment. Hannah smiled, her hand instinctively finding her belly. In 2 days, she would face the cameras and the expectations of Boston high society. But here now, with James humming tunelessly as he chopped onions, she was exactly where she needed to be. The future, with all its challenges and possibilities, could wait. Tonight was theirs, simple and perfect in its ordinariness. The ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston glowed with the elegance characteristic of high society events. Hannah nervously adjusted the brush pendant necklace, her gift from James, as she watched the crowd of guests in gala attire arriving for the Innovatech charity event. Breathe, Sarah whispered next to her, looking impeccable in a black dress. "You look stunning, and more importantly, you're ready." The navy blue dress they had chosen at Neiman Marcus fit perfectly, highlighting her pregnancy in an elegant and professional way. Her hair was arranged in a soft bun, a few loose strands framing her face, a personal touch that Sarah had reluctantly approved of. "Where's James?" Hannah asked, looking for his familiar face among the guests. "Receiving some important investors," Sarah replied. "But he'll be here for your presentation. Now remember what we practiced. You're not just his girlfriend, you're the visionary behind the educational program." Hannah nodded her hand instinctively, finding her belly where Aurora was fidgeting restlessly. "She's agitated today." "As a mother," a familiar voice sounded behind them. Hannah turned to find Rachel stunning in a red dress. "I can't believe you actually got me an invitation to this." "Actually," Sarah interjected with a smile, "it was James's idea. He knew Hannah would need family support today." Hannah's heart warmed at the thought. James always seemed to anticipate her needs, understanding the importance of maintaining her connections to her previous life. The crowd began to move towards the main hall, where elegantly decorated tables awaited. Hannah found her place at the main table between James and Sarah. Before she could sit down, she felt a familiar hand on her back. "You look absolutely stunning," James murmured in her ear, helping her to her chair. He looked impressive in his tuxedo, but his blue eyes conveyed the same tenderness as always. Dinner passed in a blur of sophisticated conversation and cutlery clinking against fine china. Hannah observed how easily James navigated between discussions about the stock market and emerging technology, always finding ways to include her naturally in the conversations. Finally, it was time for his presentation. James shook her hand under the table before getting up to make his introduction. "Good evening, everyone," his voice resounded through the room. Innovatech has always believed in the transformative power of technology. But it took an art teacher to show us how this transformation can really touch lives. Hannah took to the stage, her legs trembling slightly. The lights were bright, but she could make out Rachel smiling encouragingly and Sarah nodding approvingly. Art and technology, she began, her voice firmer than she expected, are often seen as opposites. But in the hands of a child, they become tools for discovery and expression. As she presented the program, showing examples of her students' work through interactive holograms, Hannah felt in her element. She was no longer just James Cooper's girlfriend, she was a passionate educator sharing her vision. The applause was enthusiastic. Several executives approached afterwards, interested in expanding the program to other schools. Hannah answered questions, confidently aware of James's proud gaze. "I think I just saw a few million being pledged." "For arts education," Rachel commented when they finally got a moment alone. "It's not about the money," Hannah protested. "No, it's about transformation," James said, joining them. "And you, my love, have transformed this evening from a corporate event into something meaningful." The party continued, but Hannah began to feel the fatigue of pregnancy. James, always attentive, noticed immediately. "Time to go home," he asked softly. "But your guests, they've already fulfilled their purpose supporting an incredible program," he smiled. "Besides, Aurora needs to rest." In the car on the way to Hannah's apartment, she finally relaxed against the leather seat. "You looked magnificent today," James said, interlacing his fingers with hers. "Did you see how impressed everyone was? Not with the CEO's girlfriend, but with the passionate educator." "It's still strange," Hannah admitted. "This whole world of glamour and millions. But you navigated it perfectly," he assured her. "Because you stayed authentic. That's why I love you." Hannah smiled, touching the pendant around her neck. "Thank you for giving me the space to be myself, for not trying to turn me into something I'm not." "Never," James promised. "You and Aurora are perfect exactly as you are." When they arrived back at the apartment, Hannah was exhausted but fulfilled. Tonight had proved that it might be possible to balance both worlds, James' corporate glamour and her own classroom. Reality. "Your parents are arriving tomorrow," James reminded her as he helped her out of her shoes. "Ready to meet the man who stole their daughter's heart." More importantly, Hannah smiled, ready to meet the man who didn't try to change her. As they prepared for bed, Hannah reflected on how her life had changed. In a few months, she would be a mother. She was in love with a man who balanced power with kindness, success with humility, and somehow she had found her own voice in the midst of it all. Aurora stirred again as if agreeing with her thoughts. The future, with all its challenges and possibilities, looked brighter than ever. Hannah woke up to the sound of rain pattering softly against the bedroom window. The digital clock read 6:45 and her parents would be arriving at Logan International Airport in a few hours. The night before at the Innovatech charity event still seemed like a distant dream, but the paintbrush necklace on her bedside table confirmed that it had all been real. Her phone buzzed with a message from James. "Frank is already on his way to the airport to pick up his parents. Breakfast at Henrietta's table at 9:30. Hannah smiled, typing a quick reply. James had insisted on sending his private driver, arguing that it would be more comfortable for her parents after the flight from Minnesota. After much discussion, she agreed as long as the restaurant chosen for breakfast was casual enough not to intimidate her family. As she got ready, Hannah tried to imagine what the meeting between her two worlds would be like. Marie and John Mitchell were simple, practical people. Her mother was a retired librarian, and her father still ran the family's small machine shop in Minneapolis. How would they react to meeting James Cooper, CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country? The sound of the doorbell snapped her out of her thoughts. It was Rachel carrying a decaf chai latte and an encouraging smile. "I've come to make sure you don't panic," her friend announced, handing over the drink, "and help you choose an outfit that says, 'I'm still your daughter, but also, yes, I'm dating a billionaire.'" "Rachel," Hannah protested, but was grateful for the distraction. After several outfit changes, they opted for a floral midi dress, with a light blue cardigan, elegant but comfortable, professional but cozy. Aurora seemed to approve of the choice, moving around actively. "She's fussy today," Hannah commented, stroking her belly. "Of course she is," Rachel smiled. "She's going to meet her grandparents." Henrietta's table, located in the Charles Hotel in Harvard Square, was known for its cozy atmosphere and exceptional brunch. When Hannah arrived with Rachel, James was already there, chatting animatedly with Frank near the entrance. "Your parents have just gone through customs," he informed her, kissing her softly. "Frank says they're lovely." "Lovely?" Hannah arched an eyebrow. "Your father was already discussing mechanics with Frank when I left the airport," the driver confirmed with a smile. James seemed more nervous than at the charity event the night before, constantly adjusting the sleeve of his casual shirt. Hannah took his hand, entwining her fingers with his. "They'll love you," she assured him. "Just be yourself. The real you, not the CEO." "The real me is terrified," he admitted softly. Before Hannah could reply, she saw her parents entering the restaurant. Marie Mitchell, with her gray hair elegantly done up and wearing her favorite pearl necklace, scanned the room until she spotted her daughter. John Mitchell, tall and broad-shouldered even at 65, followed close behind, carrying a small gift bag. "Hannah!" her mother exclaimed, hugging her carefully because of her belly. "Oh, darling, you look radiant. And this must be our granddaughter." John commented, his voice hoarse with emotion, as he gently touched Hannah's belly. James stepped forward, holding out his hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm James Cooper. It's an honor to finally meet you." Marie studied James for a moment before ignoring his outstretched hand and pulling him into a hug. "No formalities. We're family now." Lunch went surprisingly well. James and John discovered a common interest in classic cars, while Marie was fascinated by the digital art program when Hannah explained how it would work. "So you're not just dating our daughter," Marie observed astutely, but also appreciating her work. The program was entirely her idea, James replied proudly. I just provided the resources. Hannah is the real visionary. What? About the baby? John asked directly, his paternal concern evident. James straightened in his chair, his tone serious. Aurora will be protected and loved. I've already set up a fund for her education and safety, but more importantly, I promise to be there for every important moment of her life. Hannah felt tears forming damn hormones as James continued. I know our situation is unconventional, but I love your daughter and I already love Aurora. I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of them. Marie took her husband's hand, her eyes also watering. Well, that answers our main concern. After breakfast, as they walked through Harvard Square, John pulled James into a private conversation, while Marie and Hannah followed a few steps behind. He's different from what we expected, Marie admitted. More real. I know. Hannah smiled, watching James laugh at something his father had said. He surprises me every day. And you're happy, darling, really happy. Hannah touched her brush necklace, thinking about how her life had changed in the last few weeks. I am, Mom. Scared sometimes, but happy. Marie squeezed her hand. So that's all that matters. That, and the fact that your father is already planning to teach Aurora basic mechanics. The rest of the day was filled with visits to Hannah's favorite places in Boston, including her classroom, where her parents were able to see some of the digital art projects in development. James surprised them with tickets to a concert at Symphony Hall in the evening, but it was his obvious dedication to Hannah throughout the day that really won the Mitchells over. When Frank took his parents back to the hotel, Hannah felt a peace she hadn't expected. Their two worlds hadn't just met, they had naturally intertwined. Your parents are amazing, James commented as they walked back to her apartment. Your father made me promise to take you to the garage where I keep my classic cars. And my mom is probably already planning the baby shower, Hannah laughed. James stopped, gently pulling her into his arms. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? For giving me a family, for showing me that there's more to life than contracts and board meetings. Hannah lifted her face to kiss him, feeling Aurora move between them. In that moment, under the soft light of the Harvard Square lanterns, she knew that they had created something precious, not just a romance, but a family built on foundations of understanding, respect, and true love. The fall morning in Boston brought a cool breeze that fluttered the curtains of the new apartment James had suggested for Hannah. Located on Beacon Hill, the space was significantly larger than their old home, with an extra bedroom that was already being transformed into Aurora's nursery. I can't believe you convinced Rachel to paint clouds on the ceiling, Hannah commented, watching her best friend standing on a ladder, paintbrush in hand, working on the details of an elaborate mural. Actually, Rachel replied, without taking her eyes off her work, it was James's idea. He mentioned how you always talk about the transformative power of art in children's environments. Hannah smiled, stroking her 8-month-old belly. The last few weeks since her parents' visit had been a whirlwind of change. Moving into the new apartment wasn't an easy decision. Her independence was still important, but James had put forward practical arguments that were impossible to ignore. It's closer to the school, he had said, and it has an elevator which will be essential when Aurora is born. Plus, the security system is better. The sound of the doorbell interrupted his thoughts. It was Sarah carrying a briefcase and her inevitable tablet. We have to finalize the details of the official launch of the digital art program, she announced, entering the apartment. The press have been eager for updates since the charity event. Can't we wait until after the birth? Hannah asked, taking a seat on the new sofa, another gift she had tried unsuccessfully to refuse James. Actually, Sarah smiled, we want to announce it first, to show that pregnancy is no impediment to professional leadership. Besides, the schools are excited to implement the program next semester. Rachel came down from the stairs, her clothes stained with paint. She's right, Han. You've built something important here. It's not just about you and James anymore. Hannah reflected on how her life had transformed, from a simple art teacher to the developer of an innovative educational program, from an accidental encounter to a deep relationship with one of the most influential men in Boston. Okay, she agreed. But on one condition, I want part of the funds to go to schools in underprivileged areas. James has already arranged that, Sarah revealed, consulting her tablet. In fact, he's doubled the initial budget to ensure that the program reaches as many students as possible. Hannah's phone vibrated with a message from James. Meeting ending. Dinner tonight at the new Italian place in Newbury. I have a surprise for you. He's planning something, Hannah muttered, typing an affirmative reply. When isn't he? Rachel joked, returning to her staircase. That man lives to make you smile. The afternoon passed quickly between discussions about the program final touches to the nursery and a visit from the interior designer James had hired. After much insistence from Hannah, she was allowed to incorporate furniture from her old apartment into the decor. At 7 o'clock, Hannah found James waiting on the sidewalk in front of the building. He had changed out of his work suit and into dark pants and a blue sweater that matched his eyes. "How are my girls?" he asked, kissing her softly. "Aurora is restless today," Hannah replied. "I don't think she approves of the smell of paint in the nursery." The restaurant was cozy and elegant with decorative vines entwined on the ceiling and soft music playing in the background. James had booked a discreet table at the back, away from prying eyes. "Sarah told me about the expansion of the program," Hannah commented after they had placed their orders. "Thank you for thinking of underprivileged schools." "It was you who taught me the importance of access to art," he replied, taking her hand on the table. "In fact, you've taught me a lot over the last few months." There was something in his voice that made Hannah pay special attention. James sounded both nervous and determined. "Hannah," he began, his eyes intensely focused on hers. "When you mistakenly sat down at my desk that day, you changed my life completely. Before you, I was just a CEO focused on numbers and technological innovation. You showed me that true innovation comes from the heart. James," Hannah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Let me finish." He smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "I'm not proposing marriage yet. I know it would be a lot right now with Aurora coming and the program in development. But I want you to know that this is what I see in our future. You, me, Aurora, and maybe a few more little artists along the way." Hannah laughed through the tears that were beginning to form. "So," James continued, reaching for something in his pocket. "This is a promise." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a delicate ring with a blue stone. "It's a promise ring. It's not an engagement ring, but a symbol of my commitment to our family." "Is it sapphire?" Hannah asked, touching the stone gently. "Tanzanite," he corrected. "Because you taught me that the most precious things aren't always the most obvious." Hannah allowed him to slide the ring onto her finger, perfectly complementing the brush necklace she rarely took off. "I have a surprise too," she said after a moment. "I chose Aurora's middle name." "I thought you wanted to wait to decide after she was born," James commented, curious. "Aurora Marie," Hannah revealed. "Like my mother. Because family is about honoring the past while building the future." James's eyes shone with emotion. "Aurora Marie Cooper Mitchell. It's perfect." The rest of dinner passed in a bubble of shared happiness, making plans for the future as they savored their plates. When they returned to the apartment, Rachel had finished the mural, a night sky full of stars that seemed to dance in the light of the room. "So that our Aurora will always dream big," James murmured, hugging Hannah from behind as they looked at the finished work. Hannah touched her new ring, feeling the gentle weight of the promise it represented. In a few weeks, her daughter would be born into a world full of possibilities, art, and love. And by her side, she would have a man who had learned to balance power with kindness, success with simplicity. "We're a work in progress," she whispered. feeling Aurora nod in agreement. "The best kind of art," James replied, kissing her temple softly. The first snow of December was falling softly over Boston when Hannah felt the first contractions. It was too soon. Aurora wasn't due for another 2 weeks. James was in New York for a crucial board meeting, and Hannah's initial panic was tempered only by Rachel's constant presence. "Breathe," her friend instructed, already dialing Sarah while helping Hannah to sit down. "I'll time the contractions." "It's too soon," Hannah whispered, her hand clutching the tanzanite ring James had given her. "He needs to be here," Sarah answered on the first ring. "I'm already calling the pilot," she said flatly. "The private jet can have James here in less than an hour." The contractions were still irregular and spaced out, but the doctor recommended that Hannah go to hospital as a precaution. Frank, always reliable, showed up within minutes, turning the Audi into a safe haven through the snow that was beginning to accumulate on the streets of Boston. At Massachusetts General Hospital, the team was already prepared courtesy of Sarah's efficiency in triggering the VIP protocol that James had established. Hannah was taken to a private suite overlooking the Charles River, where the city lights twinkled through the snowflakes. "James is taking off now," Sarah informed her, entering the room with her inseparable tablet. "He canceled the meeting in the middle of the presentation when he got my message." Hannah tried to smile, but another contraction hit her. Rachel held her hand, guiding her breathing as the pain passed. "Miss Mitchell." Dr. Patricia Reynolds entered the room, her reassuring presence immediately calming the atmosphere. "Let's see how our little Aurora is doing." After a thorough examination, the doctor smiled gently. "We're still in the early stages, but yes, it looks like your daughter has decided she wants to see the world a little sooner." "She's stubborn like her mother," Rachel commented, making Hannah laugh weakly. The next 2 hours were an exercise in patience and pain. The contractions gradually intensified, and Hannah alternated between moments of calm and panic about James's absence. "He's stuck in airport traffic," Sarah reported, checking her phone for the 10th time. "The snow is making it difficult to get around." Hannah closed her eyes, remembering the day she met James by accident in that Italian restaurant. How her life had changed completely since then. From a single pregnant art teacher to the developer of a revolutionary educational program and companion of one of the most influential men in Boston. "Hannah!" James's voice sounded from the doorway, making her eyes open instantly. He was panting, still wearing the suit from the meeting, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. His blue eyes were full of concern and love as he rushed to her side. "I'm sorry," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Traffic was impossible, so Frank met me with a police escort." "You're here," Hannah replied, simply holding his hand as another contraction began. The next few hours were intense. James stayed by her side constantly while Rachel and Sarah took turns between the bedroom and the waiting room where Hannah's parents had arrived after an emergency flight from Minnesota, another quick arrangement by James. "You make quite a team, Doctor," Reynolds commented during one of the exams. "Aurora is lucky to be born into so much love." Near midnight, when the snow had stopped and the city seemed enveloped in a magical silence, Aurora Marie Cooper Mitchell decided to make her grand entrance into the world. "She's perfect," James whispered, holding his daughter for the first time, unrestrained tears streaming down his face. "Look what we've done, Hannah." Aurora was small, but strong, with a surprising amount of dark hair and the same intense blue eyes as James. When they placed her on Hannah's chest, she opened her eyes briefly, as if recognizing the sound of the heart that had cradled her for months. "Welcome to the world, little artist," Hannah murmured, feeling James hug them protectively. Later, when Aurora was sleeping peacefully in her hospital crib and Hannah was resting, James sat down next to her, still holding her hand. "I got married today," he announced softly. Hannah turned to him, confused. "What?" "The meeting in New York," he explained. "It was with the board to finalize the merger of Innovatech with an educational software company. But before..." Sarah called me I had just signed the papers that make you co-owner of the digital art program. James, Hannah began, but he continued. It's not just your work, Hannah. It's your legacy. I want Aurora to grow up knowing that her parents built something meaningful together, something that will help thousands of children discover the magic of art through technology. Hannah looked at her sleeping daughter, then at the tanzanite ring on her finger, and finally at the man who had transformed her life in ways she had never imagined possible. Our very own modern fairy tale. She smiled sleepily. Better, James replied, kissing her hand. Our own work of art. The first few months after Aurora's birth passed in a whirlwind of sleepless nights, first smiles, and constant adaptations. Hannah found that balancing her new life as a mother educator and James's partner required a delicate dance between responsibilities and desires. The digital art program had expanded to 15 schools in Boston, with plans to reach other cities in the next semester. Hannah coordinated much of the project from home, participating in video conferences, while Aurora slept on her lap or played on the activity mat Rachel had chosen especially for her. You need an assistant, James commented one evening watching Hannah try to type an email while breastfeeding Aurora. Someone to help with the administrative side of the program. I can manage, Hannah replied automatically, then sighed as Aurora tugged at her brush necklace with curious fingers. Well, maybe you're right. The office James had set up in the apartment was a testament to their intertwined lives. A modern desk with state-of-the-art technology next to a paint-stained easel where Hannah occasionally still painted when she found the time. Aurora had her own space there, a playpen full of educational toys that allowed her parents to keep her close while they worked. Marie called today. James mentioned picking Aurora up to burp her. She and John want to come for their 3-month anniversary. Hannah smiled, observing how naturally her partner had turned into a father. Innovatech's powerful CEO now spent his board meetings virtually whenever possible, prioritizing time with his family. We need to start thinking about a house, she said softly. The apartment is wonderful, but with the program growing and maybe more babies in the future. James raised his eyebrows, a smile spreading across his face. More babies. Eventually, Hannah blushed. Aurora needs siblings to help her create art on the walls. James's laughter was interrupted by a notification on his phone. His face turned serious as he read the message. What is it? Hannah asked, recognizing his worried expression. Forbes wants to do a story on us, he explained. Not just about the educational program, but about our personal history. How we met, how we balance work and family life. Hannah felt her stomach tighten. Although she had gotten used to a certain level of public exposure, she still struggled with the idea of sharing intimate aspects of her life. Sarah can manage it, James continued, noticing her hesitation. We can control the narrative, use the opportunity to highlight the impact of the program on the schools. What if it affects Aurora? Hannah vocalized her greatest fear. I don't want her to grow up under constant scrutiny. James placed the sleeping baby in her portable crib, then sat down next to Hannah, taking her hands in his. Remember what I promised when we first met, that I would protect you both above all else. Hannah nodded, unconsciously touching her tanzanite ring. We can do that on our terms, he assured her. Show the world that it's possible to build something meaningful while maintaining our privacy and values. That night, after Aurora had finally fallen asleep in her crib, now decorated with star mobiles that Rachel had hand-painted, Hannah and James sat on the apartment's balcony watching the lights of Boston. Sometimes it still seems surreal, Hannah admitted, snuggling up against him. How everything has changed in less than a year. Sorry, James asked, although his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Not for a second, she smiled. Even when Aurora decides that 3 a.m. is the time for a painting session with baby food in the kitchen. James laughed, remembering the incident from the week before. She has her artistic talent. And her determination, Hannah added. Sarah said she already has the presence of a CEO. God help us when she starts walking, James joked, then got serious. About the house. I already have a few options in mind. properties with plenty of space for a proper art studio for you, a garden for Aurora to play in, maybe even a music room. Music room? Well, every artist needs musical inspiration, don't they? Besides, studies show that early exposure to music benefits cognitive development. Hannah interrupted him with a kiss. You've been researching child development again, haven't you? Guilty, he admitted. I want to give you everything you deserve. We already have everything we need, Hannah replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. But a house with an art studio would be amazing. The baby monitor picked up small sounds of Aurora moving around, and they were both silent, waiting to see if she would wake up. When the sound subsided, Hannah sighed contentedly. About the Forbes article, she said after a moment. We'll do it, but on our terms. I want other people to know that it's possible to build something meaningful without losing its essence. James kissed the top of her head. You never cease to amaze me, you know that, always finding ways to turn challenges into opportunities for growth. I learned from the best teacher. Hannah smiled, thinking of her little Aurora, who faced each day with unwavering curiosity and determination. The sound of Boston at night created a soft melody around them, a reminder of the world beyond their little sanctuary. But there on the balcony of her apartment with her daughter sleeping peacefully, and the man she loved by her side, Hannah felt perfectly balanced between all aspects of her life. It was a delicate balance, yes, but one that was worth every moment of adjustment and adaptation. A year had passed since that accidental meeting at Bella Luna. Hannah watched Aurora, now 9 months old, crawl determinedly towards the non-toxic finger paints scattered around her new art studio. The house in Brookline that James had chosen for them was a perfect testament to how their lives had intertwined. State-of-the-art technology living harmoniously with paint-stained easels and walls decorated with children's art. She definitely inherited your love of color, James commented, entering the studio still wearing his meeting suit. He bent down to pick Aurora up before she could reach the paints, causing her to let out a happy laugh. How was the show? Hannah asked, wiping her hands on her stained apron. Amazing. The Department of Education wants to expand it to all public schools in Massachusetts next year. James settled Aurora in his arms, looking at the new mural Hannah was creating. What about this one? For the new pediatric ward at Mass General, she explained. Part of that initiative we discussed with Sarah. The digital art program had evolved far beyond initial expectations. It now included not only schools, but also hospitals and community centers. Hannah had found a surprising balance between her passion for teaching and her new role as Innovatech's Director of Artistic Development. The Forbes article comes out tomorrow, James mentioned casually, although Hannah could detect a note of nervousness in his voice. Sarah already sent me the preview, she smiled. I think we've managed to tell our story in the right way. The decision to share her story publicly hadn't been easy, but as Sarah had predicted, it had inspired others. The image of an art teacher who revolutionized digital education while balancing motherhood and a relationship with a CEO had touched many hearts. Mommy, Aurora exclaimed, holding out her arms to Hannah. Her first words had come a few weeks ago, to everyone's delight. Come on, little artist. Hannah grabbed her daughter, unintentionally staining her overalls with blue paint. Oops. Another one for the collection. James laughed, referring to the growing pile of paint-stained clothes his daughter was accumulating. Speaking of which, have your parents confirmed for the 1-year anniversary? They're arriving next week. Dad's especially excited to see the classic car you're restoring. The garage of the new house had been transformed into James and John Mitchell's joint project, the restoration of a 1957 Chevrolet that would eventually be given to Aurora. For when she goes to college, James insisted, although Hannah suspected it was just another excuse to spend time with her father-in-law. Rachel called earlier, Hannah commented, placing Aurora on her activity mat. She's finally accepted the position of creative director of the show. It's about time. James smiled. She's a natural at it. The sound of the doorbell announced the arrival of Sarah, who entered the studio carrying her inseparable tablet and an excited expression. "You won't believe it," she announced. "The program has been nominated for the Innovation in Education Award. The ceremony is in New York next month." Hannah and James exchanged glances. Awards and public recognition were still uncomfortable territory for Hannah, but she had learned to accept that her story could inspire others. "Can we take Aurora?" was Hannah's first concern. "I've already booked a family suite at the Plaza," Sarah confirmed. "And Rachel has offered to help with the baby during the ceremony." "Plaza?" Hannah arched an eyebrow at James. "If we're going to do it, let's do it right," he replied with a smile. "Besides, Aurora deserves her first trip to New York in style." Later that night, after Aurora had finally fallen asleep in her crib, now decorated with a star mobile that matched the mural on the ceiling, Hannah found James in their shared office. "I have something to show you," she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a positive pregnancy test. James's eyes widened, a huge smile spreading across his face. "When?" "I found out yesterday," Hannah replied, sitting down on his lap. "It looks like Aurora will have a little brother or sister to help her with her artwork." James kissed her deeply, his hands gently resting on her still flat belly. "Another little artist for our family." "Or a little tech genius," Hannah teased. "As long as he inherits your heart, I'm happy." The baby monitor picked up soft sounds of Aurora stirring in her sleep, a familiar melody that had become the soundtrack to their nights. "I don't think I've ever thanked you properly," James said softly. "For what?" "For sitting at the wrong table that day, for giving me a chance when you found out who I was, for building this incredible life with me." Hannah touched her tanzanite ring, which was now accompanied by a wedding band. They had married in an intimate ceremony in the garden of the new house, with Aurora as an impromptu bridesmaid in Rachel's arms. "Do you know what Rachel said to me the day we met?" she asked. "What?" "That I deserved one last adventure before the baby was born." Hannah smiled. Little did she know that it would be an adventure of a lifetime. James hugged her tighter, and for a moment they sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of their home, the soft hum of Aurora's monitors, the ticking of the vintage clock James had inherited from his father, the rustling of leaves in the garden. Their lives had been transformed in ways that neither of them could have foreseen that night at Bella Luna. The accidental meeting had become a story of love, family, and shared purpose. And now, with a new baby on the way and horizons expanding in all directions, Hannah knew they had created something truly extraordinary, an ever-evolving masterpiece painted in the colors of love, trust, and mutual understanding. It was their own modern fairy tale, richer and more real than either of them could have dreamed.